All right, welcome back to the Focus Podcast, and I got a very special guest here today. I got the one and only Mikey Christos.
It's good to be here.
Hey, buddy.
You know what? I lived about 2 blocks away from your current residence.
What street?
I lived right on Kingston Road at Maine.
You were right up the
It's
hill there.
like, I'm driving and I'm having deja vu. I said, I've been on this street, and it turns out that further down this street is the photographer who did my wedding.
Shut up.
It's just, there's too many coincidences happening here.
It is.
It's just like something
aligning. It's meant to be.
And we're representing
the dark side.
the dark side.
Mine's a little faded. That's just me. You were saying, so...
Well,
it's funny. I talk to a lot of people I talk to. They're like, "Oh, I grew up there, that neighborhood here, this street. I know a musician in Peterborough is a buddy of mine," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm living on Waverly," and he's like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." He's like, "What number?" I'm like, 284. He's like, "I was born at 286.
Wow.
Next door.
It's
born out of the house."
It's that old saying: no matter where you go, you find your home or whatever.
Your home is where you're at, I guess.
Yeah, you could be backpacking in Nepal, and you meet some guy who runs a corner store in the beaches.
Yeah, I'm just gonna adjust this little frame.
Okay, not a problem.
Start with.
I want to start with how our friendship began, because I think people need a point of basis. Now, I first met you as a camera operator at the Air Canada Center, or when it was called the Air Canada Center.
Bank Center.
Or
we're not going to give any plugs. No. The Bank Center.
But that's where we met, and that's where our friendship began. But I think we have a stronger friendship, a tie that's not obvious, and that's music.
Yeah,
definitely. You represent one end of the industry, and I represent the other end, or the old school.
Great point.
Like, you're a writer, producer, musician. You perform. You package your own. You do the whole deal.
Yeah.
I, on the other hand, am the end user of your product. I take your product, I put it on the air, I play it. People respond saying, "Hey, I like that stuff," or "I don't like that stuff." And I thought, you know what? We've got a musical connection that is not obvious to, our regular friendship, which is complaining about our camera position.
Well, that's what I love about music, and it's so unassuming. It's like, especially my style of stuff, when people hear it and they're like, "That's coming out of your mouth?" And I love that because, I have my working relationship, I have my working life, and then outside of that, I have my creative life, which is this. Well, I think this brings it all together, and I'm lucky to have relationships with you and other people like that, and this is the thing that I think why I love this podcast is the music is the nucleus of it. So no matter what subject we veer off to, music is the main point of it together.
Well, I can remember you handed me, I think it was your second disc or your first disc.
It was my first one because that's the only one I printed.
Okay, so I took that, and at the time I was building a rock radio station in Belleville, OJ 95, which coincidentally was in the middle of the OJ trial. So it was like, oh, how does this happen?
No pun intended. A lot of pun intended.
So I added one of your songs onto the rotation. And I remember everybody, the record company guys that were coming in, they're going, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah.
And I'm saying, "I got him.
Yeah.
Any deals in the future, you go through me." But we added one of your singles.
Yeah.
And
amazing.
I only lasted there 8 months because my wife was pregnant and we had a child here in Toronto.
That was your own baby, that radio station.
Yeah. Wow. That was, and I worked 13 years in the city here at CHFI back in the day. And then I was at CKLN, which was an experience. I did a lot of stuff there and met a lot of musicians and people. And
okay, let's go into that. Sorry, I don't cut you off there. Keep going.
One of the things that I was mentioning about music being the other end, I had a part-time job at night to supplement my poor income, And it was at Sam the Record Man's, the flagship store on Yonge Street with the big spinning
I know
wheel.
that. Yeah, yeah.
So
I'm like the last era of that.
Well, at the time, Sam the Record Man was the largest music retailer in the country.
Damn.
There were thousands and thousands and thousands of them.
It was nostalgic going in there.
Oh,
yeah.
The place smells of it. Like you walk on the wooden floors and they would creak.
Yeah.
Anyway, my gig when I was there was I came into work one night and my manager says, we got to start clearing out the classical and the jazz albums out of this area. And I said, what for? He says, well, we got this thing called a compact disc coming in. I said, what? What's a compact disc?
This is awesome.
So he says, it's the future. And I go, oh, here we go. So we moved all these albums out. And then we had these big cardboard boxes of round discs. And I opened the first box and it was all classical music. It was the best of Beethoven.
What year was this?
Oh, boy.
80. Must have been 80. Because the first compact disc came out 85 or something. And
probably...
It wasn't really hitting consumer shelves till... That's the mid 80s, late 80s, right?
Well, it must have been because I finished university in 1980. I graduated, so it would have been around there.
Because anyway, you guys would have been getting the first shipments of CDs.
Well, we did, and the first two boxes that I opened, one was classical, full of classical discs, and the other one was full of two albums: Dire Straits' "Brother in Arms" and Paul Simon's Graceland. They were the first two CDs to come into Toronto.
Wow.
And we couldn't keep them on the shelves. I was literally opening the boxes.
Do you remember how much they were?
Well, I can't remember, but...
Probably $20, I'd say.
But I remember that Dire Straits was the first, Brother in Arms was the first CD to sell more than 1 million copies.
That's good trivia.
That's... And the other thing about Sam the Record Man's, and this you'll appreciate, is upstairs in the top part of the glorious record store was CPI, which was Concert Productions International.
Yeah.
And the two dudes who were running CPI were Michael Cole and Bill Ballard. Now, Bill Ballard was the son of Harold Ballard at the Gardens. So what they instantly became were the biggest promoters and tour organizers in Canada because Ballard used his connection with his dad to lock in exclusive rights to Maple Leaf Gardens. So if you wanted to play in Toronto at Maple Leaf Gardens, you had to go through CPI, of course. Yeah. They became billionaires. I mean, Michael Cole eventually bought out Ballard and he formed the next venture and he took over U2 and all the big tours. He became the guy. So, but it was interesting because back in the day, and you've seen my Pink Floyd ticket, you'd walk up the stairs to the top part of Sam the Record Man's, and they'd have a little wooden desk, and you get your concert ticket. You give them your cash, and they give you the next ticket that was in line.
Yeah,
it was amazing.
I remember going and buying records there because not records, CDs.
Oh, you do. So you went into my.
Well, I'm 45, so it's like by the time I was 9, 10 years old, there was no, like, vinyls were basically gone. So I was, my first music was a CD. I was given a CD at like 9, 10 years old.
Wow.
But it's funny, you know, right beside Sam's, that pizza on the corner there across the street?
Yep.
Right beside it, there was a place called Riley's. And Riley's was the hip hop place. So they had the upper floor, and there was like a middle open circle. So they had break dancers.
Oh, okay. Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and they had like graffiti people come in, and they had
you know what?
DJs, and it was always banging. Like it was always busy.
You know what? I didn't recognize the name, but one of the gigs that I had at
beside the pizza, literally right beside the pizza.
Well. When I was at CKLN, I was also a movie reviewer.
Oh.
In addition to being an on-air guy, because we didn't have that, and I just
there's no Yelp. You just went and saw it.
I said to the program director, John Jones. I said, John, we need a movie review thing. And he said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I contacted all the movie companies in town, and I was accredited.
Free movies.
So, but to make a long story short, there was a lovely lady who worked for Cineplex named Nadira. I can't remember her last name. And she had a film that was the first hip-hop film that was going to be distributed to the movie theaters, and she gave it to me as a promotion for opening night, and we went to that place across the street.
Yeah, so that makes... Okay, so the reason why I brought that up is that I worked in all the clubs, Whiskey Saigon and all that, at the end era, like the last 99, 2000, 2001, right before the smoking ban came.
Okay.
And we used to go to Riley's, and this is before I got working in the television, before I actually got a job shooting news. A friend of mine who's a great movie maker now, he made a great movie, it's out, and he's a huge, amazing journalist. But him and I were just messing around together when we were young. So he had a camera, and we would go there every week and shoot a promo for them, for Riley's. What? And they would be promoting the biggest artist every week with a new album promo. So the artist wouldn't necessarily be there. It would be like promoting Nas's new album or like Jay-Z's new album. Well, but it was like whoever worked for their company, the Toronto representative would come and work with us. And we would shoot the night and package. I think we packaged it too, because we had a stolen version of Final Cut. Oh, geez. That's when Final Cut was like $3 fucking grand. It was like, anyway, so we would do that weekly, and that's how we kind of got our reps, you know, shooting shit and shooting music and just like our own kind of style. And then, yeah, I remember that, and I remember Sam's specifically, but I also remember Sam's from way back. You know, I grew up in Toronto. I was, you know,
it's part of the history. It is
part of.
It's
Canada. Iconic. It like that, between that and Honest Ed's, those two buildings were like, this is what makes Toronto unique, and that's what I truly loved about growing up in Toronto. It had a very, this is Canadian art. This is Canadian comedy. This is Canadian music. And it was all good. That's the point. But what we're trying to make here is that everything in Toronto was the cream of the crop.
Well, we were the cultural center of the country, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
No disrespect to the West Coast.
But no disrespect to... Also, no disrespect to New York or L.A. or anything like that. Because we had it all going on. We had movies, comedy. And if you think about it, everything stems from here. The great actors, the comedy, the musicians, you know, go on and on and on. The story writers, the filmmakers, you know, it just...
We're the economic engine of the country. There's no question about it. Woo!
It got hot. That's a hot mic. It's so good.
Gee, that was something. But anyway, what that means is, like, when I was working at CKLN, we were pretty wide open, and we were a student-run, nonprofit radio station. So we made up stuff as we went on. So we played every format of music: jazz, rock. I had a Southern rock show on Saturday nights. We had hip hop, and we also did the hockey games for the university, which I don't want.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know what to say about the name of that university, which is on the corner of Girard and Yonge.
Look it up, folks. You can do the research, folks. We're just going to point you in the right direction.
But anyway, I guess what
there's a maple leaf involved in it.
I'm getting to the point. I guess we were sort of like a pirate radio station in a way. Yeah. Because we were closed circuit. Yeah. If you were on the campus, you could hear it, but you couldn't hear us outside.
What was the radius?
Well, it was about halfway up Yonge Street. And to the east, it was to about Jarvis. Yeah. But if you were walking in the quad or any of the interior buildings,
you could pick it up.
Pick it up.
That's awesome.
Which reminds me.
Let's segue to you had a radio station here in the Beaches.
Right. So what happened was, the original pirate radio station in North America anyway was Caroline. and Caroline was named after JFK's daughter.
Oh.
And they had 2 ships that they anchored outside of England to avoid government control. And they lasted for quite some time. But then the FCC got together with Congress and commercial broadcasting industry, and they shut them down. And it was on Easter.
So sorry, go back. They had broadcasting equipment on the ships.
Yep,
And they broadcasted
that's
a television show or radio?
No, it was radio.
Radio.
They were playing commercial-free radio with uncensored.
This is right up my fucking alley. This is good shit.
And REM Island was a platform off the Dutch coast, and it was a pirate radio station. No, we're talking 1964. So there was a lot of radical stuff coming out. I mean, music-wise.
Technology-wise.
Entertainment-wise, movies, everything was booming. But then the government slapped these guys down. So anyway, to bring a long story short, somewhere in the 80s, 82 or 83, I moved out of the Neil Wyzek Co-op with a bunch of people who
Where's that?
I went to school. Neil Wyzek was the unofficial residence for the university that we're not naming.
Okay. My sister had res down in Ryerson down there.
Yeah. Well, okay, you said it.
Same area.
Like, I don't know why I feel paranoid about saying Ryerson. I've got a degree on my wall.
It's not even the right name. They changed the name anyways.
Anyway, so I moved out with 3 friends.
Yeah.
And 2 of them were engineers at Rye, and one of them was me, which was an RTA student. So one day
What's RTA again for the listeners?
Radio and Television Arts.
So for the internet generation. We got.
Well, anyway, we had a house that was 3-4 stories high in the beaches here. We rented, and we're always fighting each other for music in the house.
Yeah.
And one day, Jim, one of the guys I live with, he says, "Why don't we just build our own radio station?" And I just looked at him and said, "What?" So the next thing you know, down in the basement, we're getting stereo equipment together and whatever. And Jim picks out a frequency on the FM dial, and we start playing Dark Side of the Moon one day. And his wife is looking out the front window one weekend, and she says, "There's a suspicious white van with 2 guys looking at our house." And I saw on the side of the van, DOC. And I'm thinking, who? DOC? What's that? And it turns out Department of Communications, and they had a big antenna thing on top of the.
They can't be more less discreet than that. It should just sit spying on you there.
It was the worst camouflage. So the guys are sitting in there, and we're looking, and we go, uh-oh.
It's like Clark Kent's fucking disguise with glasses.
So if you were driving your car up Kingston Road,
yeah,
and you had this frequency on
just
that
tap in.
All of a sudden, whatever they were listening to would be interrupted by our music in the living room. And so we shut her down pretty quick because we didn't want to face any fines.
So that happened all within a day?
No, this was weeks. We broadcasted. Well, we never announced anything. We just put on our favorite records. It would be Pink Floyd one day, Rolling Stones, whatever.
So did you do it just randomly? Or was you guys going full out 24/7?
Well, we did it usually in the morning before we went to work.
Oh, so you had a bit of a schedule.
Yeah, it was. So people who were driving to work in the morning
here's the ghost station.
they'd be listening to the traffic report, and all of a sudden, boom!
Cut in, money would start cutting in.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was a fun ride. It's just a little anecdote.
No, that's awesome. That's it's funny you said that because I feel like there's some. When everything went HD, all these frequencies opened up again.
Yeah,
apparently. So now it's a free for all for new technology.
Well, radio's in a downward spiral right now. I mean, it's same with terrestrial television.
Well,
newspapers, magazines, everything is.
Oh,
The digital age is well underway, and now with artificial intelligence,
it's the big changeover.
it's crazy.
Well, it's exactly like you were talking about, I think, in comparison in the 60s. Like, when the television came out and they first, it was utilized only for specific things, and then all of a sudden it became this other machine used for different things. So this is what, internet and computer is doing now.
Well, I remember sitting at home with our Remington black and white television with the antenna ears, and we'd watch Hockey Night in Canada on Saturdays, and then the picture would come in and I'm going like, oh my God. And now it's like space age technology. Everyone's walking around watching movies on their phones and or
not even watching anything. I think my friend called it's the hyper attention era. It's just like hyper swiping era, and it's just, you're not even ingesting anything. You're just kind of
what I don't understand is when I look at my kids and my wife in the living room and we're gathered around, the TV's on and I've got a movie on. They all have their phones going and their iPads going. I said, any of you watching this movie? Oh yeah. I said, no, you're not. Your eyeballs are elsewhere. So they're
it's almost like it's an over competitive thing to get your attention now, and it's almost like it's so much stimulation that you're almost hypnotized into something, and I think it's almost like a played out final version, technology version of hypnosis, and there's like deep embedded psychology, technology, advertising used to make you a restless consumer. Well, basically, I think that it ties hand in hand with being, because I think it's also the same as, I don't remember who said this, but there's a correlation with what you eat and what you consume, like, media. So all that media is kind of like just nonstop eating junk food. Well, even when you're full, you're just kind of eating junk food and it's doing nothing for you. So if you eat healthy and you use the technology in a healthy way,
well, I think you said the key thing is consumerism, and it's probably the topic that we were supposed to talk about right off the get-go. Yeah, I looked up the definition of it. And the definition is, consumerism is the propensity to consume and keep consuming. It's the drive to buy and own more stuff and to define one's identity through what they own. Economists view consumerism as a positive for consumer spending and GDP growth. Well, I watched, as I mentioned to you the other day, a Netflix documentary called Buy Now. Yeah. And it was gut-wrenching. It wasn't anything I didn't know, but to visualize the amount of stuff that you and I and the public at large consume and buy constantly is just overwhelming. Because the thing about buying stuff is no one ever thinks about what do you do with it when you're done with it. And what we've done on this earth is destroy our planet because there's so much garbage now. There's
shit
so
all
much
over it. Yeah, and regardless if you believe that global warming is a hoax or it isn't, or there's still garbage everywhere. It doesn't matter. Like the garbage recycling thing is the biggest hoax that's ever been played on humanity, and the guilt of that also, like to the individual of. You got to do your fucking part, recycle. Meanwhile, it's like the entities that be are collecting it and just sending it to third world countries, burying it up in fucking Vaughan. Over here, there's half the city here in Toronto is garbage piles, and then there's condos built on them. And
there is some fascinating elements to this documentary, and I don't mean to plug it or whatever, but there's some things that I became aware of that is in my subconscious, but wasn't in the forefront of my brain, and that is the recycling prophecy that we currently are being blinded with. they prove without a shadow of a doubt that it is primarily or majority of it is a hoax. They make us separate our stuff in the blue box. Like today is recycle day in my neighborhood. So we got our box with all the cans and the plastic in it, and we got all the cardboard. Well, what they simply do is they burn or bury them separately. So that's their recycling method. And it's shocking because when you visually see how much stuff one neighborhood generates, it's just, and then you 8 billion people on the planet, it's just we're killing ourselves. I mean, I don't think we can come back from this one.
No, well, I think it's not gonna stop until it's like the movie Idiocracy, you know, the great garbage avalanche of 25, you know.
Oh,
it's just, we're gonna go till we choke ourselves out, and we're just fooling ourselves of this, you know, noble fucking save the planet shit. Well, you know, there are people that are genuinely driven to do that, and they have solutions and technology. But at the same time, it's just like, as a whole, right? We've been hypnotized into this like belief that, you know, this is gonna go and get washed and be used as another thing, and it's like, no, it's garbage. It just gets buried, and I've seen it firsthand. Like, I worked the news, and we used to go up north of Vaughan there on Highway 7.
Yep.
Highway 7 in Kiel. If you go there, it's a big hill, but that's a man-made hill. It's like one of the biggest garbage dumps in North America. Yeah. And they had to stop it because it was so big, it was leaching garbage into the new developments that they were building nearby into the water. So they had to go to, that's when they went to Michigan. No, they wanted to go to Kirkland Lake, and Kirkland Lake was like, you're not dumping all the fucking garbage here. And they had to deal with Michigan, and that lasted like 15 years. And Michigan was like, we don't want your garbage anymore. So I think it went back to Vaughan. But my point is like, we're going to segue into this thing that consumerism is almost just like the hypnosis of consumerism of content on your phone is the same as eating junk, and just, you know, you think you're gaining some knowledge or something, but you're not. It's the same hoax as the recycling. Like, you think you're doing well, but you're not. You're just consuming. But I want to tie it to what we're going to get into is like JFK and MK Ultra mind control. Yeah. This is the end game. We're living in the end game of that type of mind control hypnosis.
Well, I think as what I've read and seen, marketing today is a scientific experiment now. They've got it down to
weaponized, scientific.
Before it was, a new product comes on the market. That's really cool. Well, now new products come out every second. Yeah. There's something like 100. How did I get this right? 1 billion new types of clothing attire per year produced by the clothing manufacturers.
I believe it.
Now, that's not it's a new top with 20 versions. It's a new running shoe with 30 versions. And you don't need that. And it's just, you come away as a human being, as a consumer, feeling guilty about having 4 coats or 5 pairs of running shoes or 20 t-shirts. You know, you feel that you haven't done your part to keep the world going, but you don't realize it because you work hard, you make some money, you want to reward yourself. I want to buy a new coat. Well, you shouldn't feel guilty about that, but in the bigger picture, the industry knows that. They know that you are going to consume because they have drilled it into your brain day and night to get this stuff.
They've mastered the psychology of guilt and...
well, it's the fear state, right?
Yeah, it's fear
state.
Keep
people in a state of fear, and you can pass whatever you want.
I think consumerism is zeroed in on social fear of like anxiety, more of those small fears that build up in you, you know, that echo too much more in your head than they actually are. Yeah. So, and that's, that narrows in on hypnosis and hypnosis triggering. So I have a song called Disposable Youth, and it's like a 3-parter, and basically it's just like I broke down this one guy's podcast, and it was the title was called Disposable Youth, and he basically said that, you know, by the age of 4, kids know 400 brand names, and we're just like conditioned, especially my age, like Generation X. I'm the last year of that. I was the first, you know, kids to be really babysat by the television, like really 24 hours or something for you here, you know.
Well, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, and
Just a couple of years. No, we're the same.
Couple of decades.
We're about 32-ish, you know. Yeah.
And I can remember when marketing was in its infancy on television. They were experimenting with various things, like Coca-Cola had that song, "I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony." I mean, that pulled at your emotional string. You know,
well, even the marketing with Christmas with Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Like that's the actual image, what you see of Santa Claus today, that's a Coca-Cola marketing plan played out.
Well, I guess the point is it started way back then, and now they've perfected it.
Yeah.
So that we are subconsciously buying and.
Well, it's perfected into you know, it's really the 20 years of online stuff. It's perfected our interaction with it.
Yeah.
And what, you know, it's almost like feeding us what we're feeding ourselves. So if you're in a perpetual state of like, oh, I'm watching these negative videos, it's going to just keep feeding you these negative videos and suggesting these negative videos. And you're going to be in that state, and you're going to perpetuate it, you know? Like a vortex, almost like a hypnosis vortex.
What is developed currently is a company called Amazon, who will ship you whatever you want to buy in a 24-hour period. You can pick up the phone at midnight and say,
where.
I need a back scratcher that I've seen online, and it's there in the morning.
Well, you said it, you nailed it. You came around. You just finally made sense to me now what you meant. You're just saying that there's a million products made a day.
Yeah.
And then that's why things can be delivered so quicker, because there's less travel for shit like that, and there's less for labor. So there's like, we can make these, and the products are more inferior now. They're less inferior. Sorry, they're shittier. So they're more replaceable now. They're more disposable now, right? So you can make them cheaper, get them done quickly, closer, and you're like, yeah, we have all these things available, but you know, you might need to buy another one 2 weeks from now.
Also, the big factor is previously, before Amazon, before Amazon, you'd go to a store, you'd see the product, you'd hold the product, you'd smell the product, you'd say, I'll come back when it's on sale. Yeah. Now you could sit in your house coat watching TV, streaming on your laptop.
If you even sit in your fucking house, you can just, if you got a phone and you're near Wi-Fi, you can just be like, I'm gonna order some shit right to this fucking corner here.
Yeah, it's become so easy.
You don't need a house anymore. You just need this mobile phone.
And talk about consumerism. Yeah. This is one way that it multiplies like a virus or something. It just, you subconsciously, or
so you
like
spend all your money, and you waste all your money for your basic needs on useless shit.
And you get tenfold of what you really need in life, and that all adds up to garbage piles and polluted water and animals dying, and
people with diseases, and and also like the hospital. I think it perpetuates unhealthiness too.
No, sure.
And I think when the pandemic hit, like there was, it was a society that was already teetering.
And I think that's an important point too, because when the pandemic happened, when COVID hit the world, people weren't going out to shop. People weren't going out to eat. People were staying at home, and they needed an outlet at home. And bang, comes this company that says, we can have stuff at your door.
Yeah.
And
What a convenience, eh?
yeah.
I think the timing, because the one thing I do remember blatantly, specifically, like that first week in March, the first press conference that Trump had, he had this fucking team, whatever, agents.
Yeah.
I called them the Ghostbusters. They had these fucking jumpsuits, and I'm like, who are these actors, right? And then they're like, first thing they said right off the bat, they didn't even mention the disease. It was just like, these companies are still going to be open.
Yeah.
Walmart, McDonald's, the big players, you know what I mean? But we're going to get it to you. We'll deliver all that unhealthy stuff to you and all this crap. And then here's the thing I want to I just want to veer left for this and we'll come right back to this.
Okay.
But this thing with the liberal government saying that they're going to drop the GST for 2 months.
Oh.
What a bunch of baloney saying. This just shows that they could have done it any time. They could have dropped the GST during the lockdown for all food and all essentials and done a whole bunch of magic like that. And now it's like all of a sudden, like, boop, we got something out of our hat. And it's not even done. It's just a proposal. They make a whole press conference and this acting thing of getting groceries and like, fucking show.
I got to be careful about what I say about the GST and HST because I'm currently under review with the CRA. Again,
aren't we all?
It's the ongoing, are you a freelancer or an employee? Somewhere along the line, some genius in accounting determined at some point, we're not going to hire people as staff anymore. We're going to freelance them so we don't have to pay their CPP or their EI.
Send them to another country that they're not worried about.
Or benefits. They cut that all out. And when they did that, it was an explosion for a business. They just reaped the rewards of keeping more profits. Oh.
Sorry, I didn't want to go there. So we're talking about like mind control.
Right.
And we were kind of veering into like, consumerism, hypnosis. So let's open the big eggshell.
Okay. Well, it's been 61 years since the greatest conspiracy of all time, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And actually, I did some research, and there's some new correspondence from the National Archives and Records that reveals there's been a fierce bureaucratic war and documents pitting the archives against the CIA and other agencies. Now, according to the Freedom of Information Act, the archives have tried but failed to get other agencies to comply with the law. So now you have President Trump in office. Well, he hasn't been inaugurated yet, but
not yet, January, right?
But he was asked if he was going to release the still sealed files on JFK, and he's now rung in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on his side.
His nephew.
Yeah, so Trump has said that he would establish a new presidential commission on assassinations. Well, it's not going to go anywhere. It's just like the UFO thing. Every president that comes into office gets asked 2 questions from the greater...
Sorry, I didn't blow in your face there.
Greater beings out there, and that is, are you going to release the JFK files
and the UFO?
And the UFO. And Trump's first time around, he said he was going to, and he never did. And now he's doing exactly the same thing. Oh yeah, I'm going to have a commission, and I'm going to tell you all about UFOs, and he's not going to do it. He's just...
I don't believe it.
Yeah.
And he was on Rogan, and Rogan asked him about the files.
Yeah.
And as far as he got, he said he looked at it, and he said they wouldn't release it because it was in jeopardy to certain people, their safety.
Yeah.
Which is a bunch of malarkey, I guess. I don't know. It's maybe there's a grain of truth in that, because what we're talking about, what we're about to get into, is like that is the tip of the iceberg, is the JFK assassination. Mm-hmm. Is like, then it leads into everything we're talking about. Mind control, hypnosis,
Well, I have a book called Crossfire, and I think you've read it.
I have read that one.
Jim Marrs, which is the most exhaustive study that I've ever read on the JFK thing, because I was really into it, but it was my parents who actually drove me to be interested in the JFK thing, because I was a little guy running around the living room when the assassination happened, and I saw it on our black and white Remington. I couldn't correlate it, but my mom got a hold of the original copy of the Warren Commission, which an American friend of ours brought across the border, and we had it, and I think my brother still has it. I can't find it anywhere. But that's how my fascination with JFK happened, and I think I've read hundreds of books on it, and I think this is the best one. Now, Oliver Stone turned this into the movie JFK. He based the movie
Kevin
on
Costner.
Yeah.
Which is mind-blowing at its time, and I remember how much of a blockbuster it was, and that was like that concept of that, looking at JFK at that time, was so fucking big.
It was.
In 91 to have a different perspective other than the narrative of what you've been told.
Yeah.
And I it's funny, we talked about this before, the Warren Commission. I saw that original documentary. I can't remember, it's called the Warren Commission or something, but it's a real journalist doing a documentary. No, it's not a documentary, it's just journalism. And he's just journalism. So he basically it's basically right as the Warren Commission is released, and they're questioning everything, and they question the Dulles police. And they're questioning their relationship with Jack Ruby.
Right.
And how did Jack Ruby get so close
to
Harry, or what's his name, Oswald, and shoot him and have all this access, and also their relationship with him prior to that, and the Dulles police involvement with the body and removing the body, and the narrative. They're the ones that provided the narrative, right? The bullet, the magic bullet they found on the stretcher. All these stories that they set off the bat. But the thing that really intrigued me in the movie was every eyewitness that they interviewed had a story about somebody under the bridge. A few people by the fence. More than 3 people like orchestrating it. And just coincidentally, like all those eyewitnesses, they're like at the end of the documentary, is like all these people died within 2 weeks. It's just like so. But when you're thinking and looking at common sense, you're just like, okay, there's a narrative that needs to be erased instantly, quickly. And they did it in people's eyes, like they did it right. And that's what. Sorry, what I'm meaning to say is that broke the psychology, the mental. Unison of America and the world, like right in front of their eyes. Well, I think
now that we look back on it 60 years later,
fear, that was the big real planning of fear right there, because it's like, here's a president that's going to make change, and we're going to kill him right on TV, right in front of everyone, and you're going to see with your whole family and everything, and it's going to be etched into all of your brains.
It became, what the assassination of JFK has become ultimately is the template going forward since 1963 of how to do a conspiracy. Here's the steps: the disinformation, the release of all these characters, the Cubans, the oil industry, the politicians.
All the stories. You release all the stories.
That's right, and you confuse people. You counter them with all this information, and no one can see through it. No one can see the trees for the forest, type of thing. And that's what they've done with the UFO thing too. I mean, since the beginning of time, almost
since 47.
I believe they were here long before then.
I know too.
But I got 2 stories I want to tell you. My favorite 3 UFO conspiracies. One has to do with the great blackout at Niagara Falls. Remember that? When the entire east coast of the United States...
Was that 2003?
No, this goes back before then. This was in 1965. There was a massive power blackout in southern Canada all the way through to Pennsylvania.
Holy fuck.
Some 30 million people, including everyone that lived in Niagara Falls in that area, suffered from this blackout. And for years, they tried to blame the blackout on a faulty switch that knocked out 1/3 of like the whole eastern United States.
Well, that's a pretty faulty system if you're gonna ask me.
But the real story, well, one of the theories is, and this is one of my favorite things, is UFOs were identified in the sky over the power grid, and
nuclear power.
Well, the waterfalls generate the power to drive the nukes.
So
So to make a long story short, one of my favorite conspiracy theories is the speculation that UFOs were running out of fuel or something, and they had to juice up. So they parked over at Niagara Falls, and they weren't there for the quickie wedding. I thought that was great.
I love that one. That's a great one.
Now the other one
is innocent. It's just like,
yeah. I mean, I think that
it's what people would do. It's what humans would do if we went to another planet. We're like, oh look, shoot, there's some fuel.
Okay, so this one's pretty good. In 1989, in April, a girl named Linda Napatololi was identified later on as Linda Cortell, was abducted in New York City. Okay, so she's a 45-year-old woman, and she's in her apartment, and it's 3:15 in the morning. Her husband's sleeping, and in through this window comes an alien.
In New York City.
In New York City. Takes her out and teleports her, or floats across the alleyway, out through the window, up to the spacecraft, does some experiments on her, and then brings her back down. Now, what's really cool about this is that there's some hardcore witnesses.
That's what I was just going to say.
Here it is. The United Nations Secretary General Javier Perez and his agents were in their car and suddenly stopped and were waiting as these three men witnessed the abduction. They saw the woman floating across the air to one of these brightly lit UFOs, and to this day, I think that's like my favorite.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one.
That reminds me of the movie Batteries Included. Remember the one with the old folks, they're seniors, and this little floating machines come around, and they're looking for fuel, batteries or something. And anyways, they ended up being more like human.
Well, perhaps the most successful...
maybe it was based off one of those stories or something.
There's one that is based off it, and that's Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Oh, yes.
Which was written and directed by Spielberg in 1977. It's about an alien spaceship which lands in an area called the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. And by pre-arrangement with the U.S. government and outer space ambassadors, let's call them ambassadors or something, an extraordinary event happened.
The music thing, that boom, boom.
President Kennedy was going to spill the beans about this. We got to correlate it back. But 12 American astronauts in jumpsuits took their duffel bags slung over their shoulders, 10 men, 2 women. They marched into the spacecraft where they didn't exchange. People who were previously abducted were returned to the Earth. These volunteers from NASA climbed onto the spacecraft, and somehow Spielberg got permission from the government, because the government was beginning to relax the whole concept of us being visited by extraterrestrials and unexplained phenomena. So this was one way for them to approach the American psyche and the public psyche.
Give them all the information.
Yeah, right. So anyway, this event happens in New Mexico in April of 1964. It's not unreasonable to conclude that Spielberg had an inside track, as I mentioned. It was called Operation Crystal Night, or what is previously being called Project Zerpo, which you know about.
I've heard about.
And it claims the 12 astronauts left in 1965 in July were taken to the planet Zerpo, and here's the kicker. They returned in 1978, were debriefed for a solid year by the Air Force. A 3,000-page book was made on their experiences. The last survivor of this historic band of pioneers passed away in 2002. He suffered from large doses of radiation. In retrospect, it seems a shame that President Kennedy didn't live to see his initiative, because he was going to spill the beans about this.
Oh, yeah.
He was assassinated only 5 months before the first landing occurred. And I just think
the timing is very, like, the
it's
timing with the landing and, like, the end, like, that pinnacle of the Cold War and him getting assassinated. It's just too, like, coincidental.
Kennedy was doing so many things that were going to change the world that we now live in.
And his brother.
He was going to get rid of all the myths, and he's trying to break up the
CIA, basically.
Yeah, he was doing lots of stuff, and he was going to stimulate the economy by getting rid of those guys that charge you money to borrow. And anyway,
the thing I found interesting about, the new one that Oliver Stone put out, I think it was a movie or a new documentary. It was not his movie from '91. He put out a new doc that came out a couple years ago.
I can't remember the name of it. I never saw it.
Anyways, he was on Joe Rogan, and nobody picked it up. Not one fucking theater, not one festival. It's fucking Oliver Stone. This is like one of the biggest movie makers in the world,
I know.
Let alone America. Best screenwriters, probably one of the best imaginations for fucking writing.
Well,
there was one festival or something in France that picked it up, and I think Joe Rogan got him quite a bit of publicity on his podcast by being there and promoting it, because I saw it only through it was like some other, there's a million different streaming sites. It was just like some odd streaming site I found.
Well, thank God for streaming in a way, because the whole face of movie production has changed. Before, historically, films were made by film companies.
Yes.
Like MGM and United Artists.
Yeah.
And they would write contracts and they would approve scripts. Now the streamers have moved in and bought those companies, and they're starving for content. So documentary people and independent filmmakers now have a vehicle to try and get their stuff on, and it's still measured in what we see on those channels, but they're out there now. Like, you could go to Netflix and you could see documentary after documentary. Now, mind you, they're popular subjects. They're not super controversial, but it's still, for them, it's a way to get their craft out there. I mean, up until now, you'd go to a big studio like MGM and you'd say, I got a documentary. And they'd laugh, well, what's the numbers that we're going to get in seats in the theaters?
Because they don't look at it in an art perspective. It's just like, for now, it's like this gear, all you need is a little bit of gear, and it's just like imagination and how you can put it together, your story out there. It's easy now.
It's fantastic in a way if you're involved in that industry. I mean, I only feel that it's more access for everyone.
Yeah. It levels the playing field, basically.
Yeah.
What I was going to kind of tie things to is, because you're talking about radio and all that, and when I was here with Tim, we were talking about how a lot of radio station guys have been shut down. Rogers fires people, Bell fires people, but the landscape is changing, and it's so fast, and it's the Wild West. And the way I see it is like a lot of guys who have the gear, know the shit. They've been doing it for 20 years, like you did before. You just start your own radio station online, and there's so many of those now. So that's
Wow,
you know, I reach out to that for my publishing, and it's like I'd rather to like be affiliated with somebody who's seasoned like that on a new platform than somebody who's just like coming in and it's like I want to be a you know, like everybody's got to start somewhere. But like I'm saying, that there's a new wave of radio stations and there's tenfold compared to what.
Well, the purpose of radio when I was in it was to inform people about things and to entertain people with music. Yeah. It was the music end of it was the promotional end for a record company to get their artists to be heard and sell records and stuff. Well, that doesn't exist.
The only medium.
That doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. I mean, you know, now bands make the majority of their income from live performances.
And I mean, all the streaming.
Yeah, well, Taylor Swift was just in town, and the only thing you can hear a week later after her show is how much revenue she brought into the city. I mean, it's not even about the music anymore.
Yeah, it's a juggernaut. If you have a big team and a good artist, you know, and there's a few and far between artists like her, but now it's a new level of well, owning your own, having your own team. You don't really need the label anymore.
No, and it's a way for artists, if they have the gall and drive to
own their own shit.
Yeah, to try and drive. I mean, there's countless cases of established artists from the 60s and 70s and 80s who've sold their catalogs, their music catalogs, to company ABC or XYZ. Yep. And now they're finding out, if I go on the road for just 1 year, nudge, nudge, Oasis next year.
Sell another 40 million albums.
Exactly.
Because there's a whole generation that their parents have listened to it. Well, or people my age that have never got to see them when they were young. And then they come out again now on a tour and like, fuck, now I have money. Yeah. I can go see Oasis. I never had a chance when I was 20 years old.
And that's why bands are hanging on longer and longer on the shelf life.
Second golden age of tourism. That's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, the Rolling Stones.
The 80s, like they said, the mid 80s was like, peak. Yeah. And then
it was,
CDs changed everything.
Yeah.
And then we came full circle, full disc. We came to a full CD, round. Let's keep. If you want to add some more to JFK, I don't know how much time you got, but we can round it up with some JFK stuff.
The JFK stuff is just...
Or let's just wind that to the mind control stuff again.
Yeah, I think the UFO topic, the assassination stuff that's happened. I mean, JFK wasn't the only guy shot in office. I mean...
His brother.
Yeah, Bobby was just... And Robert, his son, who died mysteriously in a plane crash. That
MLK, all that.
I still think that it's the greatest conspiracy ever because it put a placemat, if you will, or a organizational chart for whoever nefarious companies or whatever, wanted to pursue some kind of assassination or manipulate the markets or whatever. I just think that it was the template for what was to follow and what has followed for the last 60 years.
The fear template.
Yeah.
Really, and I think it's exactly what has played out to today of our hyper anxiety type of society and just fear, consumer driven, consumption driven.
Yeah. It's for you and I mean, well, I'm in the last third of my existence on the planet.
The golden
But
era.
I've got a 3.5-year-old grandson who's running around the house every morning at 5:30 yelling and screaming like he's a dinosaur. I'm worried about what he's got. But you know what? I've come to the conclusion I shouldn't worry because the worst is yet to come. I know that, but I wasn't responsible ultimately. I'm part of the guilty party now. And whatever I can do to make it better for him now, it will ease my conscience. But, that's not the way the world operates. is still go, go, go.
Well, if you think of that time span, like we said, right? You saw it live, so that definitely etched something to your head as a child. You didn't even know it, but it probably did.
Well,
I saw 9/11 as a 19-year-old and or 20-year-old thinking, this is that. This is a time when you're most naive and like the world's your oyster and all this stuff, and you see this live and you're like, holy fuck. And that was I guess you can say my generation's fear. Our assassination in front of our eyes, which also that was I remember, I never forget watching the Challenger blow up live.
Right. So
that was fucking devastating.
There are moments in everyone's life where they remember where they were when big events have happened, whether it's the assassination of JFK or 9/11.
Yeah.
Or there are moments that stick with you.
It's etched into the psyche.
Right.
And I think you're right. It's a footprint and it's a blueprint. Also for like what we're trying to say is like from the 50s to now, it's like the guideline of what you were saying in the beginning with JFK. It's the guideline of chaos and fear and kind of this
misinformation.
Misinformation and
like the stuff that I've mentioned here. I mean, it's.
I think the term misinformation to me is all the information.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's just everything. Throw everything at the wall, and it's in there somewhere. So you can look at all that, but it's right over here.
At the same token, they bombard you with so many different angles and it's just that you get confused because you can't separate that. Yeah, your brain is only limited to X, Y, and Z.
Especially when you're already like a society that's anxiety driven and consumer driven and like impulse driven. It's that type of psychology is just like
and events like COVID have proven that you can control your population, their movement, and stuff like that. Aside from the virus, the disease, and the destruction that it did, but
that fear alone is a fear in itself, and then it was just hyper, megaphoned into our psyche. Pretty much, like that was the last,
Well,
like you say that like 9/11 was like, oh, okay, they said there was an attack on American soil the first time, but this like COVID was like right into everybody's living room.
And
like,
it was
right into your fucking
and it was pretty
last
universal
comfort space.
It was pretty universal. It was
so that was a scary fear for that.
It is still a scary fear because what's next?
It's been burned into people's psyches too because it's to each his own. If everybody still want to walk around with a mask, so be it. Whatever, it's their choice. But I think some people got that got burned into them.
Oh, well.
It's never going away.
It's never going away.
Never change back to normal.
No.
Whatever normal
but
is.
It's always the next thing that I wait for now. It's just like, okay, what haven't I seen or heard or felt? And that's what the scary part about the future of my grandchildren or whatever is like, what's the next thing? But you know what? I think Woody Allen is like the most neurotic filmmaker I've ever seen in my life. And when I watch his films, he's always like worried about breathing and psychology and stuff like that.
It's like that subconscious kind of you just never stop chattering.
And I just don't want to become that, But I find myself entrenched in some things like UFO conspiracies and.
Well, it's interesting, and it's also to me, it's a curiosity thing of like. What's out there and what's you're just looking into stuff too. And the thing that gets me is the MK Ultra one. So that's McGill. We can do part 2.
Yeah, our time's almost
up. When we get to show 9/11, we'll we did 47.
We didn't talk about the oil industry.
No. This is a 10-parter. I think we
didn't talk about James Bond.
No, I got another book downstairs. It's a JFK book. It's the Oliver Stone one.
Okay.
And it's basically the actual events, but there's his fictional twist
Yeah.
with it. So
Well, the thing that gets me the most about the JFK
JFK's
thing
new?
is
It's through the eye of something. I'm gonna look it up.
what really grabs me to this day is Jacqueline, his wife, goes and marries Onassis
Yeah.
and disappears from the entire American public and lives happily sort of ever after with one of the richest, most influential Greek tycoons in terms of shipping and stuff. And I just thought, to this day, it's kind of bugged
so
me.
blatant. That's
Like,
just like
I think she wanted security.
Yeah.
She wanted that stuff, but it just seems so. To this day, no one's really addressed that as to why she, or maybe it has, and I haven't seen it.
Or the elephant. These are questions that are basically the elephant in the room, and it's just like, really?
Well,
Yeah, and my elephant in the room for me was 9/11 when they had footage of Osama bin Laden in the cave right away, and I was like, that day, he delivered a tape to somebody in a newsroom that day, because it was hard to send footage online that day in 9/11. I'll tell you what,
good courier service.
There's some good courier service, and it was like, and that sent me down. So I just want to ask you one last question, because I know you got to go.
Yeah.
I have a movie that sent me down all this, like, looking into things and questioning things, and it was They Live for me. So what was a movie, or was it a movie or a book or music or something that just started your kind of curiosity journey of
I think what it was.
well, right away, making your own radio station, is that your own kind of curiosity in a way?
I think when I was 16 years old, I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a sports journalist or broadcaster or something in sports, because I was playing sports. It was my hobby. But I also had this deep desire to be a writer, which I've never really fulfilled. But in doing that, I always admired journalists and investigative journalists. And so I think when I was younger, I would watch 60 Minutes and programs that were kind of looking into subjects. Yeah. I didn't know how they were regulated or rules were being, influenced on
attention.
But it got my attention, and then I just had a natural curiosity to, what is that glowing light outside the window during the Montreal-Boston game in 1968 that my mother and I were watching, and stuff like that. And then JFK happened, and it just came as a part of my being. I just need to rationalize as much as I can. I'm easily influenced by the fact that I watch too many documentaries. I feel guilty about buying a new pair of socks now. I mean, it's just we live in such a fast world compared to, like, you hear this from your grandparents, for crying out loud, but it's true.
Yeah.
My mother's life when she was a teenager during World War II, playing on the streets in Holland, because she's Dutch, with V2 rockets blowing up neighbors' houses, and they still found time to kick a ball around or whatever. To the world that we live in now, where my 3.5-year-old is smarter than most adults, because he can.
Crazy.
It's so fast. It's become like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's a weird time we live in now, because it's like there's no real threat like that to us,
Yeah,
by the way, I found the thing. It's called Through the Looking Glass.
Through the Looking Glass. I've heard
2001, and there's certain details about the gun, and it's very eye-opening in certain things that were never brought up in previous ones. And I think there was like a second part to it after too. And also yeah, I just wanted to touch on that there.
Well, lad.
Well, thank you
It's
for
been
stopping
good.
by, sir. And yeah, we could have another 10-part series with all this shit we talk about.
Yeah.
But
Well,
no, I appreciate it.
It's good to get it out of the system.
Yeah, no, and it's fun to talk about. And thanks for coming by. I think we dropped
My pleasure.
an hour and 10 there. All right, buddy. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Good night, folks.